The International Space Station has been a big part of humanity's ability to understand space and deep space travel. Every mission up there is a step toward that goal. Air Force astronaut Colonel Nick Hague has wanted to be an astronaut since he was 5 years old. Then his big moment finally came in October 2018. He made history. He became one of the very few Americans ever to abort a spaceflight mission after the launch. I initially sat and talked with him and his wife in the fall of 2018, just before that launch. Fast forward to now. He's been rescheduled to go back up to the ISS on March 14, 2019. We'll hear his perspective on getting a second shot at his dream and what it took to get there. And let's hear from the man who lived to tell the tale. I'm Staff Sergeant Trevin Cannon, and this is the Air Force Podcast.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Here's our conversation just before the first launch. Welcome, Colonel Nick Hague, joining me for the Air Force Podcast, along with his wife, Lieutenant Colonel Katie Hague.
Well, thank you. Good morning.
So are you both into science? Is that a thing?
No. Not a thing for me. No, actually, I'm a public affairs officer, so I am on the softer side of of science.
We balance each other out.
Very cool. So you just kind of reel him back in.
Yeah, exactly.
So in October, taking off from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz MS-10, you're going to join the Expedition 57 crew, returning to Earth in April 2019 as a member of Expedition 58. Talk a little bit about what you specifically are entrusted with doing up there for 6 months. What's going to be going on?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and really I'm rotating in as a crew member, and we train to be able to do pretty much anything up there. We're up there for 6 months, so it's really tough to say what you're going to be doing on a daily or weekly basis while you're there, because the schedule is so dynamic. So we train to be able to handle maintenance activities, to maintain the space station as a national laboratory for research. We train to be able to do spacewalks to go outside and fix things if we need to.
Is it structured in such a way, because I'm sure that I feel like with the space mission that every single step is structured to the T. Do you just keep purposefully busy over the 6 month period, or do you kind of, is there free time, or is every single second of every single day taken up?
So the answer is yes to both of those, right? So every minute of the workday is mapped out by a team of thousands on the ground, trying to make sure that we have everything we need to be successful and that we're using the time up there to the maximum efficiency. But you can't work every minute of every day and still have anything left in the tank. So we work a fairly standard work week, 5.5 days a week, and we work for 8.5 hours a day, so that we do have time to recoup as well as spend a little bit of time in the evenings.
Get on the top of the spaceship and drive golf balls into space.
Yeah, it's not not quite like that, but you do get the chance to to do hobbies. So
Watch movies.
Yeah. So looking out the window and kind of thinking about what you're doing and putting it in perspective, you get the opportunities to do that. Contact with the family and stay in touch. You get the chance to do that as well.
How does he involve you guys back on Earth?
So we're not sure yet, because this is his first launch, but there is a great group of people from NASA that provide psych support for the family, which sounds a little scary, but it's actually pretty cool. They set up video teleconferences with us for once a week, and it's at a certain time, obviously, because it's got to be linked up, I guess. And then we're able to send small little care packages up to the station.
Really?
Yeah, it's really neat. So the supply vehicles, the resupply vehicles that go up throughout his time up there, we have like a small little piece of that package that we can add a box of cookies or a T-shirt or a picture one of the kids drew, and then when we talk to him on the weekend, they'd be able to see it. The kids will be able to see it floating up there, which is kind of cool.
If you did send a T-shirt, you could wear it pretty much the whole time, because in zero gravity, it just kind of floats on your skin, right? So you don't, it doesn't
Yeah.
actually
it
get
gets
oily.
dirty.
Or does
Yeah.
it? Okay.
So we have to wear clothes. There's no way to do laundry up there, so we wear them until we need to throw them away, and then we throw them away. But I've been told that you can wear a T-shirt for quite a long time up there, and it stays relatively clean because it doesn't touch your skin so much.
Yeah. Is there a possible spacewalk in the works for you?
So while I'm up there, there is one spacewalk scheduled in December to go out, and it's really to try to configure the space station to be in a good position in case we have a failure in the future. The robotic arm has dual strings of power that we need in order to provide redundancy when we capture visiting vehicles that come up with supplies. And so if if one of those goes down, then we lose that redundancy. And so we're going to perform a spacewalk using the robotic arm as well as two people outside the station. We'll work together to try to establish a third way to provide that redundant power for the robotic arm.
I've read somewhere about 250 to 300 experiments you'll be conducting up there. Which one would be your favorite, and what would some of them even be?
Yeah, so surprisingly, 2/3 of the science we're going to perform up there, we don't see until we get on orbit. So they train us to generic skills to be able to perform any science that they want us to do up there. So some of the ones that I'm going to do and I'm going to fall in love with, I don't even know about yet. Some of the ones that I've been involved with so far are the ones where I'm the subject. So there's a couple dozen different studies where I'm the guinea pig, and they're collecting information about me. So some of them are invasive, like I've had to do muscle biopsies. Some of them are just trying to look, and they image your mind, and they want to see, they're looking at the brain and how we react to tasks, and on the ground, how we determine how we navigate, because we have gravity as a constant that tells us where down is. And then when we go up on orbit, they're looking at how does the brain change because you lose
what that does to your
that
equilibrium.
gravity. Yeah. So you start to ignore your equilibrium, but then also the neural pathways in your head may change over time because you're not thinking about gravity pulling you down all the time. And so how you move around in three-dimensional space, they're interested in how that changes.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
there's a lot of changes up there, and that's probably the most fascinating thing is how much the body changes.
As commercial space travel evolves with things like Policy Directive 1, which was just signed recently, what do you hope to see in your lifetime? Because Policy Directive 1 basically is they're putting a whole bunch of money back into space and a lot of refocusing on those efforts.
Yeah.
So what do you hope to see? What that brings?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that the target is to try to get back to the moon and then push on from beyond there, right? And so I think that, what I'd like to see, first off, our mission on the station is part of the necessary step to enable that. Some of the things I'm going to be demonstrating up there in terms of the technologies we have in the new systems are really trying to figure out how to make them efficient enough to be able to use them as we go. So life support, how do we recycle the air that we're breathing? How do we reclaim the water so that we don't have to take all the water we would need for the years that it would take in order to do a Martian mission and come back. All of those technologies we're trying to really wring out on the space station because it's easy to launch a demo, bring it home, fix it, launch it again, and so we're really close. And so before we start taking those steps deeper into space, we test those things out on the station. So trying to continue that. So, personally, I'd like to see that momentum continue. It's exciting to see us trying to push back to the moon and to push beyond that. And so if we can just keep making those steps, every mission is not a giant leap. Every mission is a step. And, if we can continue to string together successful steps, it'll be pretty amazing what we can accomplish.
Yeah, you're close enough to where if, your spleen ruptured, you're 4 days away from Earth versus how would you deal with these things 9 months away?
Absolutely.
And on Mars. And I think, and like studying the different ways of propellants to get you from, because all it takes all the fuel to get you out of the pool of gravity from Earth. instead of just maybe taking it, launching from the moon where it takes much less energy to do that. Where does your imagination go when you see that this funding and interest more broadly is returned to the space race that we're trying to get? We're more serious about it now.
Yeah, no, I mean, my imagination goes where every little kid's imagination goes. The idea that we become a spacefaring world where people go and they work and they live in space, and it becomes routine. So the more people that can experience it, the more we can push further into space and establish a more permanent presence. I just think that's really exciting.
Yeah. What about your imagination? What will happen when you're going to look up and see, my husband's up there? What's
I have a little bit of a different perspective. It is very exciting, and it's exciting for our family. But I will tell you, from the spouse standpoint, and you mentioned deployments, yeah, it's a little unnerving.
So how do you file a travel voucher?
Yeah, that's a good question. DTS.
You use DTS, yes.
Do you actually
I'll when I get back, I'll file a travel voucher to,
I think it's $3 a day or something.
I was on low Earth orbit for 6 months.
All right, incidental expenses.
There you go.
What discovery from space travel thus far is most important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's probably what I think is something that we mentioned a little bit earlier. 20 years on the space station that's a pretty significant milestone. And you had mentioned previously the term space race. And so I think that the space station has served as this symbol of what we can accomplish, and it's pretty amazing that the technological feat of trying to have people living continuously for almost 2 decades in orbit, and all of the complexity of the system and the vast team on the ground that takes to make that happen. And so I think one of the discoveries I think we've proven to ourselves is that the secret in that, you mentioned Jack Fisher earlier, and he would say the awesome sauce that's in there.
He does love that
he
word,
loves
I
that
know.
term. That special sauce is the collaboration that it takes to make that work. And that's on the team inside the United States, the collaboration between NASA and the Air Force and all the support that it provides. It's the international cooperation with all the 15 other different countries that are participating. It takes that kind of level of cooperation to make something like that happen. So, I think that's a discovery that we've proven, and we need to continue that as we move forward.
Just let it evolve as far as it can possibly go.
Yeah, this idea of driving deep into space and going to Mars, we need that special sauce. We need that level of international cooperation and collaboration in order to be successful.
On a more personal note, what does your family think about you going to space for 6 months? What is that conversation like?
Well, I mean, on a personal note, so if we start just, what does Katie think about this, right? So this is not the first deployment we've had. I've stayed home while she's deployed. We've both been deployed at the same time. So we've got experience, and I think that comes with a level of familiarity with the process. We know that it's going to be difficult to be away for 6 months. We also know that it takes a little bit of reintegration after you get back before everybody's back in sync and you get back to normalcy. It's a challenge that we're familiar with. I think that we talked about connectivity before. When you look back at our first deployments, when we first started as captains, our first deployments were as captains. The connectivity then compared to the connectivity now, I'm going to be able to call and talk so much that it'll just be annoying to her. Back then, if you were able to talk once a week, it was a huge deal.
Could you stop floating out of the frame, Nick, please?
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be boring. It'll be monotonous, and hopefully that's the way, so that I'm so integrated into the life that it's just like I'm not gone.
Yeah, and I think from our standpoint, we're kind of lucky in the sense that we're both active duty Air Force, And so our Air Force careers have kind of prepared us for the separation.
I think if there were any preparation, that would be
We're kind
the
of
way to
lucky
do
in
it.
that sense. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that when you look up, it's gonna.
Oh, it's
he's not gonna be
terrifying.
in the
Don't
Middle
get
East
me
or
wrong.
anything. Yeah, it's.
Well, when she looks up, I'm only 250 miles away.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not thousands of miles away.
Yeah, make it sound really.
Well, on certain nights you
simple.
can see it. I went on a stargaze thing the other night, and we were able to see Jupiter and its rings.
There's an app
Yeah,
where you
there's
can,
like
watch the
bunch of
ISS
them.
fly over or whatever. I've
we've-
downloaded the app. Is basically what I'm saying.
We've seen the space station fly over standing in our driveway.
Yeah.
So you
it's
don't
pretty
have to go
cool.
in. People don't realize that if you just look at the right time, you can just look up and there it is. It just looks like a star screaming across the sky.
Absolutely. Speaking of Mars,
Mhm.
that's I think what's on a lot of people's minds when we speak space, because that is endlessly exciting. The radiation is really bad on Mars,
Mm-hmm.
and if we were to colonize it, we would basically have to live underground, because the percentage that we're exposed to is almost unbearable. So why do we want to go there?
At some level, there's this deep urge inside of us to, many of us to go and explore the unknown. The whole purpose for going out into space is to try to answer questions. In the process of exploring, we make these discoveries, these scientific discoveries, and we're able to better explain the past and what's happened. We're better able to understand our environment around us and figure out what's going to happen. But I think in that process of exploration, we also find out a lot about us, and when we figure out what's inside of us, then we can better craft and understand and determine our own future.
Yeah, and I think it's happening in a way that I didn't see. In other words, robotics are advancing faster than jet propulsion. So 3D printing, we could theoretically 3D print an entire colony before we even get there, and then we just get there and move in.
Yeah, I mean, that's you talk about the challenges. I think there's a lot of things that we're going to need to solve in order to get there, and those solutions don't exist yet. So, for the people out there listening, we need innovators. We need people that are looking for solutions and have big ideas and want to try to solve hard problems. We're going to need all that help in order to make this work. The end solution, we don't have an idea of what it looks like yet.
Yeah. And besides trajectory windows for Mars, that if you don't pick it's like 2 years and some change. If you don't take off, then you can't be slung into its orbit. It's very precarious.
It is. I mean, it leads to these really long missions. But those are not unlike some of the really long missions that some of the first explorers trying to circumnavigate the Earth took. They're commitments to that put yourself at a lot of personal risk, but we can now look back and see the importance of those risks and those expeditions and everything that they secured for all of humanity and our understanding of the world and helped it evolve into what it is today. Those are the same types of things I think we hope to accomplish by going deeper into space.
And you spoke earlier about basically working together. You're flying up with a Russian counterpart.
Yeah, my commander's Alexei Ovchinin.
Yeah, and what is that like working with him?
So yeah, I know him well. Part of my training, a significant chunk of my training in the 2 years leading up to launch has been living over in Star City, learning how to fly the Soyuz, and so I've got to know him really well. He's a great guy, and I just started learning Russian when I showed up at NASA about 5 years ago. It's amazing. He's a military pilot, and so there's this common understanding we have with each other that even though I might be speaking broken Russian to him and he's speaking broken English to me, we understand each other. And we've been able to sit in the sim, over the last year and a half, to the point where, we know how each other are thinking, and I can expect, we anticipate each other's moves, and we're backing each other up, and it feels like just a well-oiled machine, and no different than any crew I could put together here in the U.S. We're in it together. Mm-hmm. But it's worth, I think, highlighting, because there are a lot of airmen out there that are involved in the space mission. But I don't think that they fully realize what they enable us to do in terms of human exploration of space. We launch all of our launch vehicles that resupply the station. We launch a bunch of those from Florida. It takes airmen supporting those launches to make that happen. When I launch out of Kazakhstan, there are going to be airmen positioned to help with an emergency recovery should that be necessary. When I'm on orbit in the space station, if there's debris flying around that could come in close proximity to the space station, we need to move. And so there's airmen on the ground tracking everything that's moving around up there, and they give us notice that we need to get out of the way. There are airmen that ensure that the GPS signal is there for us when we need it. The station relies on that to determine how it's pointed and where it's going in its orbit. We can't do it. We can't do this mission. We can't go up there and perform the science that hopefully is going to help shape our understanding of humanity without airmen. And I just want to say thank you to them for doing what they do quietly and persistently every day.
1. Engine turbo pump at flight speed. Engines at maximum thrust. Lift off. And there is liftoff of the Soyuz MS-10 to the International Space Station, carrying Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin.
Launch day, October 11th, 2018. The world watched, not yet knowing how close they were to seeing a nearly catastrophic failure. The Soyuz was prepared for its ascent. 5 years of preparation led to this moment. The emergency light came on, and that's where it got scary.
The failure of the booster.
The rocket boosters failed to detach just before they reached zero gravity.
Failure of the booster.
Then they were able to detach the rocket. There was a violent jolt. Then the Soyuz descended toward Earth,
Enable power.
maxing out at 6.7 Gs at one point. Average people would panic.
190 seconds into the flight, Soyuz traveling about 4,700 miles per hour.
Don't be in a hurry.
Hague's training and experience kicked into high gear and was able to survive this potentially fatal emergency.
We are in
Here's our conversation before his second launch attempt.
Air Force training plays into a lot of that. It's prepared me for everything leading up to, the career I had leading up to that launch prepared me to respond in that situation. It's not my first in-flight emergency. We've had those when I was doing flight tests out at Edwards Air Force Base. I think what you realize as you gain those experiences is that the best thing that you could do in that situation to help yourself is to maintain your cool and trust in your training. To be honest with you, it becomes more reflex than anything. We drill it in enough and we prepare enough that when it's all on the table and you've got to deliver, you're ready to do it, and it's almost second nature. So the fact that I was speaking Russian, it feels weird if I speak English inside the Soyuz, because that's how we train. We train in Russian. And in terms of responding to emergencies, 90% of the time we're in the Soyuz in the simulator, we're juggling half a dozen different emergencies, trying to figure out how to make it to the station or make it home safely. So it really just kicks in.
What was going through your mind? I looked at the photograph when I was watching on the BBC. I saw a photograph of you sitting on a couch back at NASA, kind of a 1,000-yard stare. I wondered what was going on through your mind at that time.
Yeah. So that photo, sitting back on that couch, was actually in Jezkazgan, about 20 kilometers from where we landed. They got some helicopters out there and picked us up and brought us back to an airport so we could get on fixed wing to get back to Baikonur. And so I'm sitting there on the couch, and the head of the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, is sitting there next to me. It's just this surreal feeling of, wow, that just happened. The flight was so quick; it was only 20 minutes, and then it was over. And then you find yourself completely in a place completely different than you expected to be, and just letting your mind kind of finally relax after all of that surge of adrenaline and working through the problem and landing safely, and just starting to process all of that of what really just happened and where do we go from here. So it was kind of an out-of-body experience.
Did you think your chance was over? Like, how did they get you back in line for a second try? Is that normal?
So I don't think there's anything that you can say is normal about what we went through. The fact that they put us back in the rotation so quickly, I mean, there's programmatic reasons to do that. I'm part of many experiments where they've already collected a lot of data. They already have equipment on orbit to support those experiments. For me, they have all of my supplies on orbit to support me being there. And so programmatically, you can make use of those resources. Personally, definitely want to get back there, right? So we're at the apex of our trajectory, and I'm staring out there at the curve of the Earth and the darkness of space, and so close you can touch it, and then to have it kind of ripped out of your hands, that's devastating. And so, yeah, I want to get back there personally. But what I really think it boils down to is that the mission that we're doing is so important. It's a mission where we're going up there and we're collecting data so that scientists on the ground can better understand our world. They can better understand our bodies. They can better understand the universe around us. And that's a vital mission that's benefiting all of humanity. So it's important that we continue that. Just because there's some bumps on the road or there's some obstacles doesn't mean that we give up. We've learned from our failures and we move forward.
Is Miss Hague and family still as excited as they were, or do they want you on the ground now?
It's mixed emotions, just like me, right? They'd love to have Dad at home. Colonel Hague, the other Colonel Hague, is excited, and the excitement builds as we go each day. But they're also nervous. You have to be nervous. I think I'm an example of what can go wrong. Luckily, it turned out okay. But you have to approach every launch with an understanding that this is risky. And it goes back to what I was saying before. We accept this risk because of the importance of what we're doing.
So with adversity, we can always hopefully try to walk away with having learned something. Is there a something for you to have learned from this?
I guess the thing that has most impressed me the resiliency of my wife and my two sons in this situation. There are very few people that can say they have a loved one that's been on top of a rocket that when it was launching had a catastrophic failure, and that are going to turn around and watch that person launch into space again 5 months later. It takes a unique strength, and my wife is a source of that strength for the family. And so that's what I've learned is just how lucky I am to be surrounded by, an amazing woman and a strong woman that's able to navigate all of that and keep it all in perspective and support our kids through all of it as well. It's been impressive.
Are you going to have a new set of experiments, or are you pretty much, those are on standby until you get there?
Yeah, so some of it's a mix. Some of the experiments wait until I get there because I'm the subject for them. And some of the activities will change because of just the timing. One of the things I'm going to be fortunate to be up there for is, we're going to have the visits of the first commercial crew vehicles, the unmanned ones, and then later on the manned versions. The other thing, historically, it's going to be awesome to be up there for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing in July. That's going to be a great time to be up there, to be in space while we're celebrating that anniversary. we'll also be up there on the 12th of April, which is the anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight in space. And so celebrating those two things while being on the space station that's been operating for 20 years and in a cooperative manner, right as we're at the cusp of getting ready to go back to the moon as an international cooperation again, it's just a really special time to be part of the space program.
The world will be watching again as Colonel Hague launches once more to the ISS. We sure wish him the best of luck. On second thought, I don't think Hague's journey has anything to do with luck. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Air Force Podcast, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to hear more Air Force stories like this. I'm your host, Staff Sergeant Trevin Cannon.
3, 2, 1, 0.